everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conjugal Visits. I'm your host, John Rochetter, for this segment, and without further ado, let's begin. So, in 1996, Wes Craven gave us the groundbreaking film Scream. It was filled with blood, gore, and satire. It was essentially the slasher of the 90s, but most importantly, it was a well-balanced horror film with blood, gore, and satire. Everything was suitably done very well. In fact, some people would even say that this is Wes Craven's best movie and not Nightmare on Elm Street. Well, when the box office return came in December of that year, all the studios around saw nothing but dollar signs, so naturally, we got a slew of slasher films. And most of them were Scream ripoffs. I mean, just a year later, you had I Know What You Did Last Summer, and then followed by its very terrible sequel. You had Cherry Falls, which unfortunately went straight to video. And now we're going to be talking about the film Urban Legend. This is the dedicated topic of this segment. This was directed by Jamie Blanks. This was his directorial debut in 1998. He did make another film called Valentine for Warner Brothers back in 2001. I really don't feel like getting into that one because I really don't like anything about that movie. I found it incredibly mean-spirited, and there's a ton of issues that I don't want to even touch. So, this movie, Urban Legends. This, to me, has got to be the guiltiest of all guilty pleasure horror movies of all time. For me, personally, that's not even a topic of debate. It has got to be the biggest Scream ripoff I've ever seen. It comes down to the characters, the writing, which was trying to emulate Kevin Williamson's style. It's so obvious what they're trying to do, trying to balance horror and comedy, twists and turns everywhere, and guess what? There's a setup for more sequels. And yes, there are other sequels. I have not watched them. I probably will never watch them because why the fuck would I? Now, the reason why, for me, this is definitely one of the guiltiest of all guilty pleasure movies is because it is entertaining. I will give it that. It doesn't hold back on trying to heighten its entertainment value. Easily the best things about it. I mean, you've got a movie that has Brad Dourif as a stuttering gas station attendant, a guy who did the voiceover for one of the most iconic horror characters in Chucky. You've got Danielle Harris as a promiscuous gothic chick who is obsessed with chain smoking and lithium. And you've got Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, as a mythologies professor at a university. Can it get any better than that? I mean, this is kind of why I watched this movie to begin with. Unfortunately, these characters are just sort of there and they don't really have much to do. They're basically side characters. Instead, there is a half-baked story that's focusing on Alicia Witt, Rebecca Gayheart, and Jared Leto. The wrong characters to be focusing on. Tara Reid and her abysmal acting and her lack of grace when running away from a killer. She has one scene where, as I just described, she's running away from a killer, and it has got to be the funniest goddamn thing I have seen. I can't tell if she's actually trying to be scared or if it's just for our amusement. Also, going back to that killer, I want to address the costume that this killer wears. A double-bladed axe, okay, decent choice of weapon, but a parka winter coat and a black face mask. I don't understand this because was this supposed to be filming in winter? I'm so confused by this outfit choice because I'm pretty sure this movie was actually supposed to take place in the winter months, and I did some research and that was the case. Unfortunately, they just let time lapse and they filmed the damn movie anyway, so that's just wonderful. As I said before, the story is very poorly stitched together. There's this tragic past, obviously, suggesting that there was this big massacre and that Robert Englund was the sole survivor. And the anniversary of said massacre is coming up, and Jared Leto wants to write an article about it, of course. I mean, this isn't anything new. We've seen this before in other slasher movies back in the 80s. There was Graduation Day, then there was Final Exam. It's nothing new. So it's just basically recycling tired tropes that we'd already seen in the 80s and also trying to fit like a movie that's Scream. Going back to those characters, I mean, there's even a cop character who might as well be the female version of Dewey. Someone who's trying to be on top of things, but they're also kind of a buffoon as well. And the dean of this college might as well be Principal Himbry from Scream. It's so embarrassing. They didn't give any thought to these characters. They're very one-dimensional. The one cool thing I will admit is that I do like the modus operandi is that it's all on urban legends. I love reading about urban legends. I've read all of them. If you ever read The Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, those are classic kids' books, frightening kids' books. But I learned a lot about urban legends through those books. And it's kind of cool. It kind of reminded me of this one movie that came out many, many years ago called Theater of Blood, in which Vincent Price is this very talented Shakespearean actor, but when he doesn't receive the Best Actor award from critics, when he felt he deserved it, he tragically committed suicide. However, he was recovered by a bunch of homeless people, and his modus operandi to get back at the critics were actually to recreate some of his best performances in Shakespeare to kill the critics one by one. There were scenes out of Othello, Julius Caesar, Romeo and Juliet, and King Lear. So it was pretty cool. There was one really good scene that I did enjoy with Danielle Harris. There's a scene involving her IMing a guy on her computer in her room. She's got everything black. Alicia Witt's her roommate. She can't stand her. They can't stand each other. In fact, I think Alicia Witt actually walked into her having sex. But anyway, she's IMing this guy on this goth chat service, and they want to, do some lithium. Drugs, hail Satan, all that good stuff. So she goes to the bathroom to get ready, and she asks the gentleman, "What room are you in?" He doesn't respond. So when she goes to the bathroom and comes back, it says, "Yours," on the computer. The killer's already in the room. He starts strangling her. Alicia Witt comes into the room thinking that Danielle Harris is actually having sex, but in truth, she's getting strangled. The following morning, Alicia Witt wakes up and sees that there are slit marks on her wrists, and there's a message in the dorm room, and everybody's freaking out. So everyone is convinced that she just committed suicide as opposed to something else happening. Now, I promise you I won't get into any spoilers because I'm sure a lot of people haven't seen this particular movie, but I gotta say, the ending is a thing of hysterical beauty, all because of its acting and its 90s nostalgia that it's trying to create. You've got candles, you've got visual aids, and you've got characters that are so larger than life that they are swinging for the goddamn fences. They're going for it. They're really pulling out all the stops on what you can do to try and give the most absurd Nicolas Cage type performance imaginable. And because of that, the movie is so entertaining, it will not stop. Yeah, that ending, it's one of the most obvious setups for a sequel I've ever seen, where you think it's going one way, and then it goes another way, and then, oops, it goes another way, and before you know it, the sequel is going to come out 3 years later. So yes, I'm going to make this very clear right now. This movie is not good. It's very subpar. There's some very weak performances. The story isn't very compelling and some really weak dialogue. There are some funny one-liners here and there. As I said before, Brad Dourif, Danielle Harris, and Robert Englund, they're the reasons to watch this movie. Unfortunately, they're just not getting enough screen time, and this movie would have been significantly better if it had focused on those three, because those three are legends of the horror genre. They have continued to work tirelessly year after year on different horror projects, and they are beloved by the horror community. Not these other three that I just mentioned. But I gotta say, it's entertaining, it's worth a watch, check it out sometime. It's free somewhere, I guarantee it. On that note, I'm gonna sign off, and in the meantime, stay safe, stay crazy.
Please, somebody help me!
Oh yeah.